This is my review of the Downhill Cybin by Don't Trip. This is the first precision truck I ever bought, and I've been pretty pleased with it so far. I say so far, it's not like this is new to me. I've been skating this truck for the past year and a half. I've taken it everywhere. I skated it at Maryhill. I've skated it in Virginia, Tennessee, and competed in a lot of races on this truck. One of the things that this is kind of good at is race style downhill skating. So we're going to dive into some of the details about this truck. I'm going to assume that you already know the specs and maybe the available sizes of this. If you're a serious consumer, all this information is available on Don't Trip's website. My pair specifically is the 110 to 128 millimeter width, and all of the trucks come with adjustable base plates. I think the only other options that you can kind of get on these are, of course, one narrower width, a few wider widths, and you can also get fixed width axles if you want. Personally, I don't know why you would choose to do that, but hey, that's up to you to decide. Now, the Downhill Cybin is based off of Don't Trip's Cybin. The Cybin is designed for traditional cone slalom, and it's where the name slalom downhill trucks comes from, as they're designed for, agility and good turning. Downhillers saw the benefits of that and have adapted the geometry from trucks like the Cybin into a more downhill space. The difference between this truck and the Cybin is that this truck comes with urethane in the pivot cup and in the insert bushing from the factory, and the Cybin comes with a spherical bearing in both the pivot and the hanger. What that does is it gives you a really precise and direct feeling. It's incredibly nimble. It responds extremely accurately to your inputs, but for downhill, it can be a little bit too much feedback. It's a bunch of metal on metal contact. Urethane kind of acts as our suspension in our boards. It's all we've got. You've got the softness of your wheels, and you've got the forgiveness of the urethane and the pivot cup and the insert bushings to kind of soak up bumps. And when you replace critical components like the pivot cup and the insert bushing with spherical bearings, you eliminate that. It has the secondhand effect of having a deleterious effect on your slides. I noticed that with spherical bearings, slides on certain pavements in the right conditions and the right wheels can have really violent chatter and really violent hookups and kickouts. This is not true of all situations, and in fact, Dane Hanna designed his Pro model truck with Don't Trip to have spherical bearings in both the pivot and the hanger. I think that's pretty cool. I do think it's going to be, as Brits would say, a little bit Marmite. Some people are going to love it. Some people are going to hate it. It is a pretty different, raw, visceral feeling. And the downhill Cybins go a different direction and try to be a little bit more forgiving for our purposes. Real quick, I want to interrupt here and do the whole YouTube thing. If you're enjoying this video, drop a like. If this is a video that you want to watch the rest of, but you get distracted, whatever. If you like this video, YouTube will show it to you again later. It's something that my ADHD ass loves a lot, is I like a video early on, and then when I inevitably flip over to Instagram to doom scroll and come back and YouTube reset itself, it'll pop up in my recommendations. I can go finish it out. These videos are long, and I get that you're going to want to do other things. So come back, check it out later after you drop a like and subscribe. I've been doing a lot of these lately, a lot of videos. I've got more creative stuff in the pipeline, and I'm always open to suggestions from you. I love when you DM me on Instagram at OwenCampbell777 and say, hey dude, I've got a video idea for you, or I have a question regarding my setup, or just send me a picture of the board you're riding. I don't care what gear is on it, but I'm just curious. Yeah, back to the video, do all those things. These trucks are mad stable. The combination of the insert bushing, like the full size insert bushing, and the bushing seats, these trucks actually have, it's short, but it's sharp. Pretty tight bushing seats that really start to restrict the truck as soon as you get into the lean. These are really quick to correct themselves over rough pavement, over chunder. And I've had no doubts, questions about my stability skating these trucks into the high 50-mile-an-hour zone, and I would skate faster on them. They've not let me down. I've been, real impressed by them. Real quick, I'll give you an idea of the insert bushing and the bushing seat, just because there's nowhere else on the internet that you're going to be able to see that stuff. I really am frustrated with a lot of skate manufacturers. I wish they provided more pictures and like things for scale. Product photos are usually just a few and they're glamorous. Like, I want like a 60 photo gallery of all these skate products. I want you to have them next to other similar trucks. I want to see them mounted up on a deck. I want you to show me like all the components. Sorry, Venom bushings are a really tight fit on this Kingpin, which is awesome because it's eliminating slop, but it's also very annoying to take apart. Wah. All right, here we are. You can see insert bushing in there. It's a really nice snug fit, and you can see the steep wall of the bushing seat. That does make it pretty restrictive. It almost acts like a cupped washer. So I almost always skate flat washers on these trucks. I've never found that a cupped washer is usually too restrictive. Now, I've been talking about spherical bearings. I think I should show you what I'm talking about, because this is a pretty rare type of modification in the world of downhill skateboards. Only a handful of trucks are compatible with these. Essentially, it is this bearing, and it has the same diameter as an insert bushing. So this is a Venom 95A HPF insert bushing. They have the same diameter, and what this does is it goes into the space between the Kingpin and the hanger. And whereas this connection is soft but high rebound, so it's gonna give you a little bit of cushion, but still a lot of support and return to center. This has no rebound at all because this can rotate freely, but it is incredibly precise. This is going to give you really accurate turning, and I think this is a modification that anybody buying these trucks should look into. It's an incredibly unique feeling. It feels awesome on smooth surfaces. Sometimes it feels a little strange sliding. But my setup right now is actually this 95A HPF bushing in the back, and I use a spherical bearing in my front truck. That gives me the, the stable, comfortable, and predictable back end that I want, while having an extremely nimble front truck. And spherical bearings are awesome because they don't increase the return to center. I prefer a truck that does not have a strong center so that I can really easily initiate like tuck leaning through corners, so I don't have to break my form to really get leverage over the trucks. Spherical bearings are a cool way to do that, and Don't Trip does sell them on their website. So if you're buying this truck, you can just add a couple of these to your cart. I highly recommend it. Add, at least one if you're going to get this truck. Don't be afraid to add two, but two might not be your cup of tea. This truck also has excellent grip. I've got no complaints about the grip here, although I will say that you need to upgrade these almost immediately. The stock ones that come with the truck is the Riptide. Actually, no, that's a crank one. Where are they? The stock ones are a Riptide like 93A WFB core insert. And the issue I have with these core inserts are a couple things. I think WFB is a very low rebound formula, which feels good for having like a carvy, loose, non-restrictive setup. It feels good out of the box, but it doesn't support the truck properly at the limit of traction. I found that my turning was not super reliable on this. I wasn't getting, consistent feeling through corners, and it made it hard to kind of predict what line I was going to be able to take through corners. It did remind me of similar feelings that I got with non-precision trucks. Also, these are not toleranced very well. The hole in the center, at least on this set and many other sets that I've tried, is pretty loose on the Kingpin, so it shakes side to side, and then that's just a little bit of slop that you don't want. The Venom HPF is a really, really tight fit. that is super tight on the kingpin, super tight in the insert bushing hole, and that is just rock solid for dialing down all the slop in your setup. It's such a tight fit, in fact, that some of these might not fit, at least not right away. So what you might have to do is, it'll be hard to see, but is sand down the edges and the outer surface. This is a 93A HPF that I modified. I literally just rubbed this on my grip tape in order to kind of take off the sharp edge and then reduce a little bit of the outside. I also noticed that putting a little bit of oil, you can even just like swipe your forehead or your nose to get some of the oil off your face, rub it around the outside. It makes installing these a little bit easier. Yeah, highly, I made a whole video about trying out these insert bushings several months ago. Highly recommend checking that out if you're serious about upgrading these trucks. I think these 93As really just don't do the job, and it's what it comes with stock from the factory. Another thing is that this truck comes with Riptide APS bushings from the factory. It comes with 95A in the rear and 80A in the front. These bushings are pretty good. I have no complaints. I don't personally use them anymore because I found that I just like the feeling of the Venom HPF urethane a little bit more in these trucks. I find it a little more reactive, a little higher rebound, and at the lower speed spots around me, it's fun. These provide great lean and have just like a really nice, smooth, like carve and lean to them. But the HPF felt like it had a little bit higher performing, a little better grip, a little better braking force and slides. If I'm using an insert bushing in my front truck, that insert bushing already provides a little bit of return to center and resistance. So I'll use like a 73 and the blue 78 in the front, like you would find on a Bear Smoky or a Rogue Slalom or like a Zealous Downhill. But if I'm using a spherical bearing in the truck, the spherical bearing doesn't provide any additional return to center. And so I'll use like a double blue Venom HPF tall in the front. That would be 78A, 78A. And that feels about the same as, you know, this with like a 93A insert bushing in the front. A cool feature about these trucks is that the ride height stays the same no matter what angle you're using. The angle adjustment is really easy to do on these trucks, and you can even do it with the wheels on. Especially if you're using like a narrower truck and wider wheels, it does help to remove the wheel in order to make this adjustment. But use just like your little 1/4-inch Allen key, and there are these screws in the base plate. You loosen them up. You usually don't have to turn very far, but I have this really locked down. Come on. There we go. The front truck angle adjustment goes from 30 degrees to 55 degrees. And the rear truck adjustment goes from 10 degrees to 40 degrees. I find myself usually sitting at 50 degrees in the front truck and somewhere between 20 and 25 degrees in the rear truck. Lately, I've been using actually a 15-degree rear truck. I've been enjoying it. Now, being able to adjust this is really cool because you get to tune the oversteer and understeer properties of your board. The oversteer is when the back of your setup wants to drift when you're on the edge of traction. It's when the back of the board wants to kind of rotate around into a slide. And understeer is when your front truck wants to lose traction first when you're on the edge of traction. And instead of going out into a slide, your line through the corner just widens and you don't actually drift, but you kind of just scrub that speed. I intend to have a really even balance between, oversteer and understeer. I like when my board is extremely neutral because it allows me to control like the angle that I want in the slide if I need it to scrub or if I need it to do a little bit of oversteer drift in order to, kind of tighten up my line. The really cool thing about these trucks is that is so easy to tune. If you're entering quarters and being like, man, I'm really uncontrollably starting to drift through here, lower your rear truck angle or maybe increase your front truck angle, set the bias of that center of rotation a little further back, and then you'll kind of correct those understeer. This is a phrase that I talk about a lot, so perhaps I make a video explaining understeer and oversteer. As a term that comes from kind of car driving dynamics. But it's my favorite thing about these trucks is being able to tune that property specifically. You can see that the motion on this adjustable base plate is smooth. I say that and all of a sudden I can't adjust it. There we go. It is a pretty tight fit. They did a good job making this precise. But the angle adjustment is smooth, meaning that you can change this on the kind of level of individual degrees. I often will shoot for like a 22.5-degree rear truck angle. The base plate has small markings on them that indicate 5-degree increments, so that you have that kind of reference. It'd be cool if it marked it even smaller, but then we would be having little indents on there that are almost too small to be perceptible. I really love this sliding action. It's really intuitive. I recommend having like a kind of a small like nylon hammer. Sometimes, especially if it's mounted on your board, this can get a little bit tight and hard to adjust. And so having something like soft to tap on it with, even just like a plastic skate tool, is a good way to kind of break this loose and start to be able to adjust it. So a problem that I had when this was new and all of these painted surfaces were new, or I guess anodized surfaces, is that after riding it for a while, especially on rougher surfaces, the angle would change. It's because there was such little friction here. So I had a skate trip early on in owning these trucks, maybe like a month into owning them, where I started the trip on 50 degrees and ended the trip on like 45 degrees. Had no idea I was, understeering through turns. I didn't have the same turning angle that I thought I had and was really missing my line by the end of the trip. I had no idea that the front truck had changed 5 degrees. This wasn't like a safety issue. It didn't suddenly do it. All of the vibrations from, full days of skating slowly, incrementally moved it over. I haven't had that problem anymore since really breaking these in. Once the surface gets scratched up from, you using it a few times, once some sand and dirt gets in there, it really helps squeeze it and prevent it from sliding. But when it's new, it's just something to look out. Every couple sessions or so, check your angles, make sure they haven't shifted. And it's an annoying problem, admittedly, but it does go away with use. One of my bigger complaints with these trucks is that I'm a little bit suspicious of the construction quality of these. I know them to be kind of a lower grade aluminum than a lot of other truck manufacturers are using. It makes sense if you consider the price of these trucks compared to other trucks. These are offering tons of customization, lots of complex geometry in order to make this work, lots of small parts. And if you're trying to be competitive and bring your price down, then you got to make that cut somewhere. And they made the cut in the just kind of quality of the aluminum that goes into these. I think that with, grippy wheels or heavy riders, just situations where you're putting a lot of force into these trucks, sometimes I think I've noticed a chatter sensation that comes from these trucks. That might be the metal actually like flexing under the load. You can see like there's a ton of really thinly machined CNC parts in here, and it's held together in multiple pieces. Even if it's not the metal actually flexing, there's just enough connection points that could be loose or have a little bit of slip system between them that it's not entirely locked down. And then also the first rocker that I had, so the part that the truck mounts into, that holds the kingpin and the pivot cup, this is called the rocker. The first rocker that I had actually came loose. The rear kingpin got knocked loose, and I could push it out, I could wiggle it side to side. With a quick email to Dan at Don't Trip, he was able to hook me up with a new one, and that one has been totally fine. Both the front kingpin and the rear kingpin have been Completely unproblematic ever since then. So it's possible that I just got a dud, but it is not the only don't trip truck that I've ever seen have issues with the kingpins getting sloppy and knocked out. So it's something to look out in terms of like long-term maintenance, and then maybe just avoid, doing impact style tricks with these. Dropping off of ledges and early grabs and things like that. Not to say you can't do it, but it's not the highest grade stuff, and it's not built for ultimate strength like a lot of the other trucks that this competes with are. For some people, the cupped bushing seat on the hanger might be a little bit too restrictive. I don't find it too restrictive. I find that I'm able to compensate for it with different bushing choices. You'll see that on this rear truck, I have a 93A HPF on the road side, 95A HPF board side, and that gives me the amount of lean that I want with the 95A insert bushing in there. Something to note is that the insert bushings are really, really hard to get out when you put them in. The Riptide Core insert bushings are not, but if you're putting in these Venom inserts, it can be so frustrating to get them out. Lots of wiggling the truck back and forth, wrestling with it. And if you're not careful, you can really damage the insert by moving the truck back and forth through a really wide angle range. These are designed to work through just, the normal turning angle of these trucks, a few degrees of lean here and there. And if you're really cranking on them, trying to get this to come loose and wiggle out, you can really spread this out, damage the urethane, and then give yourself a sloppy ride. I actually noticed I did that recently when one got stuck in there, and I could see it just destroying the insert bushing. So I bought new ones and vowed to leave them in for a long time. Perhaps you can craft some little thing to insert underneath the truck to be able to like push it down and pop it out. I haven't crafted that thing yet. If I do, I'll let you know. But it is one of the major complaints of using this instead of the core inserts, is that this is so tight that getting it out can be a hassle and damage it. This truck only has 5 millimeters, of rake. The Bear Smokies have 7 millimeters. The Rogue Slaloms have 8 millimeters. I think the Scythe trucks that are coming out soon have 9 millimeters. The Zealous downhill trucks are something like 7 or 8 as well. The Dane Hanna Pro model trucks are 8 millimeters. So at 5 millimeters, this is a rake that's more typical of, just older generations of downhill trucks. Some people might like that, but some people might not. If they're coming from other trucks, they might feel like these trucks are a little bit unreactive, they're a little bit slow to engage the turn. I don't find this to be a problem. In fact, I personally have often liked trucks that are on the lower rake side. I find that they lean a little bit more. You get to use more of that lean to your advantage, especially mid-slide when you have something to push against. Again, because this truck, you can change the angles. You can also make this more reactive. For a long time, instead of doing like a conventional 50-20 degree setup, I was doing like 55-25 for a like little slow path race in the Midwest here. And the 55-25 was, plenty nimble, plenty reactive, especially when I threw spherical bearings front and back. It's one of the things that's so cool about this is that these trucks are chameleons. You have 18 millimeters of width to change, so I can bump this truck in particular up to 128 millimeters when I want to do a little bit more free ride, want to skate some more center set wheels, or I drop it down to 110 when I want to really do my downhill race lines and get a ton of pressure onto the lips of my wheels. I can bump the angles down if I want to just do some high speed runs and not worry about having a twitchy setup. I can boost the angles up if I want to skate, some like shorter slalom style courses and have some slow corners and really be able to crank them out. I mean, we're blessed with a few nice paths around me, and those paths are so fun on these trucks when I get to throw some sphericals in there, turn up the angle, and have just the tightest little nimble setup on the track. It's so good, and it's really, really fun to be able to have that customization. An unfortunate thing about having a truck with so much customization is that it really is hard to get these dialed. When you have so many variables to mess with, it really makes it hard to settle down on what works for you. And that is like a hidden cost with these trucks that people don't consider. You know, people will like evaluate price of trucks and they'll be like, oh, okay, the Rogue Slaloms are like $400. I don't know if they're more nowadays. I haven't been in the market for those in a long time. Yeah, Rogue Slaloms are $400, like Ronins are 600, whatever. The Zealous at 330-ish are pretty cheap compared to everything right now. That's awesome. The Bear Smokies are $400. These trucks being in the high $300 is pretty good, pretty competitive with the other stuff in the market, especially for all the customization you get. But the hidden cost is all of the bushings you need to buy, all the insert bushings, in order to make this truck feel good for you. Maybe you're going to be lucky and the stock setup is going to work awesome for you. I really don't think that the stock insert bushings should be there, so already factor in, factor in another $10 to upgrade these. Now they're a $400 truck. Maybe the stock bushings don't work for you, so you have to buy some packs of bushings. Maybe that's $20 to $40 in order to get the right tall bushings in here that feel good. And then, you want spherical bearings on top of that. If you want one, that's like $10. If you want two, it's $20. And pretty soon you have a truck that's climbing into the $400 range as you struggle to get it dialed because you're changing your angles every week, you're changing your widths every week. You have to be really dedicated in order to get these to work for you. And it's possible. I love these trucks. I've spent a long time figuring out what works on them, what doesn't work, what, different variations of my setups I can do. How do I want to set this up if I'm skating a garage? How do I want to set this up if I'm doing freeride? By the way, for freeride, I like to use 95A insert bushings front and rear for a really, really strong setup. And then I like double 95A rear and then like a pink blue in the front, the 73, 78. Just gives me a good center and I don't have to fight with my ankles too much to keep that board flat. That's really the number one thing. I think these trucks are pretty great for free ride because they do boast such a strong center, and I think that's a pretty good characteristic for any truck. Granted, they are pretty grippy, so it's not going to be the easiest free ride truck out there. Valkyries are a lot more forgiving in a lot of ways, but compare these to like the Bear Smokies. The center on these, the big insert bushing, these are well supported. The ability to change the width and tune them. This is a much more capable freeride truck. And the Rogue Slaloms are people like to freeride as well. Those are super narrow at like 116 millimeters at the maximum. So it is a nice thing that you get with these is using a wider width, match your freeride wheels a little bit better. A small annoyance with the adjustable base plates is that it doesn't fit some skate tools. Now this is a problem that you might be familiar with. It's not the first or the last truck that will have this problem. It's just a factor of the geometry, but especially on the inner mounting holes, there's this like thing that sticks out just that protects the nuts for the adjustable angles. And for a long time, I had to use a wrench in order to tighten these down instead of a proper like skate T-tool. Just because I couldn't get any of my skate tools into that space. Especially the Paris skate tool is a really tight fit in these trucks and perhaps won't fit at all. But some of your cheaper, like standard off-the-shelf skate tools might fit a little bit. It's just a small annoyance, but it does make like taking apart these trucks, putting them back on your deck, changing mounting holes, just a little bit more tedious and frustrating of a process. Also, the mounting holes are very tight on these trucks. And so if your holes on your deck are not perfectly aligned or your riser's not perfectly aligned or things like that, it can be frustrating to get it all through. Now, I would prefer the holes to be a tight fit than rather a sloppy fit. But I've actually threaded some of the holes on here just because I had to screw the machine screw right up into it on like a tight fit because I 3D printed my risers bad. And it's just, these haven't been the easiest to get on and off my board. If you're a person that likes to change your trucks on your board a lot, this might irritate you a lot. Something notable about these trucks is they have a really long actual wheelbase. So anybody who watched my longboard dimensions video would know that the actual wheelbase is measurement from axle to axle. This is different than the wheelbase of your deck. So the wheelbase of your deck is inner bolt to inner bolt, and then the true wheelbase is axle to axle, and depending on your truck, it's going to be different. On Paris, it's about 1 inch. On Ronins, it's about 1 inch. When I say 1 inch, I mean if my wheelbase is 20 inches and I put on Paris, then the true wheelbase is going to be 21 inches. These don't trips add like 2.5 inches, and depending on the mounting holes, like 2 3/4 inches to the overall thing. So if you're coming from, like, let's say Ronins or, you know, Calibers to these trucks, and you're like, oh, I really like a 23-inch wheelbase. In order for these trucks to feel the same in terms of, you know, having the same true wheelbase and having the trucks in the same position, or the axles, having the axles and the wheels in the same position relative to your feet, you might actually want to bump the wheelbase on your deck down to like 22 or 21, so that when you put this on and you have the similar angles or whatever, your turning radius is going to be similar. The pressure points on how close are you standing to your front truck, how close are you standing to your rear truck, that's all going to be similar. Yeah, it is really interesting. So if anybody's like riding these don't trips and they have a 19-inch wheelbase and they're gloating like, yeah, I ride a 19-inch wheelbase, what's up? Really, the true wheelbase is the same as somebody on Ronins who is skating a, you know, whatever, like 21-inch wheelbase. Yeah, don't take it too hard if you're like, yeah, 20-inch wheelbase is my whole thing. Or like 24-inch wheelbase is the way to go and I don't skate anything less. It's going to change from truck to truck. So on this one, you probably want to try a narrower wheelbase on your deck. If you're the kind of person that wants to spend the money and the time really setting up these and tuning them to be exact for you and understanding all the dynamics of this truck, this is going to be really fun for you to experiment with. It's been super fun for me to experiment with, but at times it has been a headache. Lately, now that I've got these dialed, I've been having tons of fun doing techie downhill. I've even been stand-up free riding these a lot, and I've been really impressed. The strong center is really helpful for the stand-up free ride, and being able to use, you know, different widths on the axle helps a lot. Yeah, overall, pretty impressed with this truck. You can see where they cut corners in order to keep the cost down, but it hasn't affected my ride too much. If you're looking for a budget truck, this is probably not the budget truck you think it is. The Zealous downhill trucks are going to be the way to go. I did briefly test those on a friend's setup, and my first reaction is that I was very impressed by them. I think they feel good. I think they'd feel better than Rogues, and that they are gonna be more mass appealing than Bear Smokies. But you don't get the big insert bushing like this. You don't get all the adjustability like this. And so maybe, I don't know. At like $385, these are priced great. They're priced competitively, but the money that you spend upgrading these will start to put them out of this price range and closer to something like Valkyries, which are also trucks that people often have to spend a lot of money on bushings on. So let me know what you think. If you skated these trucks and loved them, hated them, let us know. This is a place where I want to, you know, share our collective knowledge about the skate gear so that people can buy the right gear for them on their first try and not have to waste a bunch of time, money, and bad sessions on learning what's right and not right for them. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.